Today is Sunday, February 25th, 2024, and my name is Rita Jit, and I'm interviewing Dr. Naoko Ozaki on behalf of the Houston Asian American Archive at Rice University. So, to our students, she's more affectionately known as Sensei, and Sensei is a lecturer in Japanese at Rice and also serves as a residential associate at Lovett College. Thank you for being here, Sensei. I'm super excited to interview you and hear all the stories you have to tell.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Okay, so to begin, where and when were you born?
I was born in Tokyo, Japan. I leave out the year, but I was born in September. And the reason I leave it out is because I'm proud of my age, but students and I have this shared joke that I'm forever 21. So I always tell the students that I'm a 21-year-old with many, many years of experience.
It's good to keep some mystery, I think.
Yes.
How would you describe the household that you grew up in?
My parents were there in Tokyo with me, and my grandparents lived not too far from their house. And it's my understanding that we lived very close to my father's parents, so my grandparents. My grandmother on my mom's side lived not too far from there as well, but I don't remember anything about that time because I was only 4 when I left Tokyo. But around that time, both sides of the grandparents, my grandfather on my mom's side had passed away already, so he wasn't around. But all the other 3 grandparents were around. But yeah.
And what
Oh,
were your
and then so after that, I my sisters, Matcha and Kay, or Kay first and Matcha, and then my brother Ken were born after that. But that was after I left Tokyo.
Mhm. And after you left Tokyo, where did you go next?
There's a prefecture called Shizuoka, and prefecture is like a state, but it's not it's not a state, it's a prefecture. It means that it doesn't have a self-ruling government. It is a part of the national government agency. So that's why it's called prefecture. And so I was in Shizuoka prefecture, which is near Mount Fuji, and it means quiet hill. And that's where I lived in Shizuoka city of Shizuoka prefecture for 5 years. And then since then, I was there for 5 years. And then after that, I moved to Fujieda, which means wisteria branch. Eda is Eda from edamame, like branch beans. So it means wisteria branch. So that's where I lived for 5 years.
Oh, that's such a beautiful name. So, what were your parents' occupations?
So when I was born, my dad was still in a graduate school. He was working on his I believe he was already working on his PhD, but my mom was the breadwinner at the time. And so she was working at the Bridgestone tire company. And and then my dad finished his degrees, and then he got a teaching job at a university in Shizuoka. And so that's how my family moved there.
I see. Do you think he passed down his teaching passion to you?
I think he's more of a researcher. So the sense of academia being a happy or comfortable place, I think that was passed down to me. But he was more of a researcher. He's a scholar of Sumerian from Mesopotamia. And so he did the dead language, and he's still writing books and articles. And so he's pretty famous in that field. Where I do the living languages, and I'm much more comfortable talking with people that can actually speak the language and learn about their life stories. Where my dad was more like, I'm dealing with the dead language, no one speaks it today. And so there is some difference, but we're both doing something related to languages and also the Middle East.
I see. It's cool that you have some common ground.
Yeah.
Cool. Growing up, what were some traditional Asian values that your family practiced, and how important were they in shaping who you became?
I think there's a sense of in Japanese we have this thing like even if you're not seen by anybody else, the sun sees you, and the sun was oftentimes affiliated with the sense of God. And so I always believe that you need to do the right thing even if no one is watching. And I feel like that's something that I try to teach in my class as well, because I do think that teaching Japanese at Rice University um, pays for my living, but what I feel most passionate about is to help the younger generation become more confident and comfortable, and also choose to do the right thing, even if it's sometimes the most difficult choice.
Yeah, I feel like in your role as as teaching Japanese, you do so much more than just teaching language. You really
Mhm.
incorporate lifestyle into that, which is really cool.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then also touching on languages a bit, I love the story of what motivated you to learn English, and I was wondering if you could share that.
Sure. So initially I was trying to be a classical pianist, and so I was trained for that. And until I was about let's see, I was 14 when I left the country. And so at that point I had been practicing the piano for 2, 3 hours, sometimes 5 hours a day. Um, and so that was my passion. And every year in May, there was a French pianist called Richard Clayderman. He used to come to my second hometown of Shizuoka City, and I used to go to his concert every year, and I was such a great big fan. And one year he was speaking, he was on the microphone and he said, Konnichiwa. And then he switched to some language that I didn't understand. But then the translator translated into Japanese by saying that he said konnichiwa, and that's the only Japanese word he knows. And so now he's going to switch to English. Now, he may have been speaking in French after that. I don't know, because I didn't know English or French. But then he said something in a foreign language, and the translator translated it, but he said he was going to switch to English. So I thought, well, if I study English and if I become a user of the language, then I would be able to communicate with this French pianist and I could play next to him. And so that was my childhood dream. I was probably about 10, 11, maybe 12. And so that was the reason that I thought I'm going to study English and I'm going to be able to communicate with the French pianist. And that was my goal.
I love that story. It's always the little moments that inform
Yeah.
so much of our lives. So,
Mhm.
in your childhood, you moved around a lot. So, can you tell us where all you've been before you came to the US and how that's influenced your perspective?
Okay. So I was in Tokyo for 4 years and Shizuoka City for 5 years, 5 more years in Wisteria branch city called Fujieda. And after that, I went to Germany, and I was there just for a few months. And I was there at a gymnasium, which is like a middle school there. It was my dad's colleague's family that took me in. So I did a homestay there. And then after that, I went from there to Istanbul, Turkey. So my father, being a scholar of Sumerian, he was on his way to Syria, but he had a colleague in Istanbul, Turkey, that used to teach at I think it was the University of Istanbul, or Istanbul University. I'm sorry, I just don't remember the name. But anyway, so he was working on some books with this professor there. And so this professor and my father would just read texts together in Sumerian and then publish. So he was on his way there. He was at the time at the British Museum doing research in London, and I was in Germany. So he came to pick me up, and then we went to Istanbul. And then from there, he was, let's see, from Istanbul. Yes, so he had to go to Turkey, to Syria, maybe 2 weeks or so after he was in Istanbul with me. So he left me with a Turkish family. And so I had to speak and learn Turkish, and I forgot German completely immediately after that, because I remember my father saying something like, okay, remember the Japanese grammar. So grammar structure, meaning the verbs at the end of the sentence, and that would be the same in Turkish. And there are things that in the Japanese language classes we call it particles. It's like prepositions in English, but we have postpositions. So we have those postpositions in Turkish as well. So my father said, learn Turkish words, remember the German pronunciation because there are umlauts in Turkish as well, and then remember the Japanese grammar. Plug those in and you'll be fine. So that's what he told me. And I said, okay, that I can do that. So I did exactly that. And then I learned enough Turkish to get myself in trouble. And just before I was able to really solidify my knowledge in Turkish, my father finished his work in Syria. He came back to Turkey. We spent a few more weeks together there, and then we went back to London. And I'm saying went back as in he went back. I went back as in I had visited London before, so just for a few days. So, but anyway, so we were now in London where my father was doing research at the British Museum. And then after that, after a few months there, then I went back to Japan for a few months, got an opportunity to come to the US. And so I came here when I was 16.
Wow, and by then you had already seen so much of the world.
It
But
was
did
it was fun.
did you experience any like significant culture shocks once you moved to the US, especially between Japan and the US?
Um, Not so much of culture shock in the US, but I call this reverse culture shock, but I'm not sure if that's the proper term because when I think about it, it doesn't quite fit the definition, at least in my mind. But the bigger culture shock was when I went back to Japan from all these European countries and the Middle East. I felt like when you're going abroad, you have all these dream states of like, you start thinking of what it could be like, and you're more excited than scared, or at least I was. And so I was really excited, and then everything I saw that was different, I took it in as a positive thing. I thought I get to experience this unusual whatever because I'm overseas and I got to come here. And so that's what I was really excited about. So I did not really see it as a negative thing because when we think of culture shock, we often associate it with some challenges or something that was not so exciting. But for me, everything was exciting in those countries. And then when I went back to Japan, I was expecting Japan to be the way I remembered. So there would be no shock. At least everything would be familiar, is what I was expecting. But I think in those short time that I was abroad, I think I changed and I didn't realize that. So when I went back to Japan, it was almost like going into another country that was familiar to me in many ways, but so uncomfortable. And then by the time I came to the US, I was once again in very, very excited. And I loved being here from day one. Some of the things that I experienced in the United States were not always positive, but usually it was good. And I was just so grateful to be here. So when I came here, I was just very happy.
Wow, that's nice to hear. And now moving on to education. So in college, you earned your BA from the University of Arizona, and you were majoring in Near Eastern Studies with minors in linguistics and Japanese.
Mhm.
What made you interested in these fields of study?
Okay, so initially, it started. So when I was in Istanbul, I went to the mosque pretty much every day with my friends, and that was my playground. And we would just sit there and just talk for hours, or sometimes we would just lie down on a cool floor and we just relaxed. But when you looked up, there were all these Arabic writings, and so um, like in Islam, you have a lot of Arabic writings, and so so words like Muhammad and Allah and all these words were written in Arabic. Now I could not read Arabic because in Turkish they use basically the same alphabet as English with a few extra ones like CH and SH, and of course umlauts too. And so there were some differences there, but in when I was at the mosque, I saw a lot of Arabic writings. And also when I was growing up in Japan, my father used to go to Syria every year or every other year. And so he would come back with a lot of Syrian things, including toys and sometimes books and sometimes some other like display pieces for houses. And so I remember seeing a lot of Middle Eastern things and Arabic writings. And so for me, that was kind of familiar to me. And so that was kind of my background. And when I went to the university, I initially wanted to study piano performance. But by then I had given up on my piano career. because I didn't really practice, or I didn't even have a chance to touch the piano for several days to weeks at a time, especially when I was in Istanbul. And so I gave up on the music career, but I was still looking at piano performance as my major. And then, but when I got to the university, I saw a catalog that started with an A, and I went through accounting, not interesting, animal sciences, not interesting at all. And then moving on, and then it was Arabic. And I thought, oh, why not take it? I need some sort of language anyway. So I started taking Arabic, and I fell in love with it, and that became my major. So it was Near Eastern Studies, but with focus on the Arabic and the language itself, because I'm kind of allergic to history.
It's so interesting how your travels in your youth informed your academic interests. And then your story about picking majors reminds me of my friend who ended up in anthropology because it was near the top of the list. But you clearly have more reasons for pursuing Arabic than just that. But it's so interesting to hear about that. And then throughout your education, do you remember any mentor figures who helped guide you?
Um, I feel like I was always an accidental student. Probably this is not the best thing to say at a to a university student, but so even for my master's degree, it was the dog that took me to that university. So basically what happened was we had a dog in, so at that time I lived in Illinois, and I was looking for a graduate school, and I thought, well, there are a few different schools. So I went around to another university, and then I decided to go to Indiana University. And I went there, and we had a dog, a small dog, and it was a hot day. And as we were driving back, before we left the campus, the dog was panting like crazy because it was such a hot day, and we felt bad for the dog. So I said, I'll take you to a cool looking building. Let's just stop there. Let's cool down before we get back in the car again. So we took the dog inside, and it was the School of Education building. And I was looking at the little sign on the wall that said language education. So I talked to my well, the person that passed by me at that point was the department chair of language education. And then she said, okay, you want to come and talk to me? And so I went to her office, and then I was talking to her, and she said, you're such an interesting person. I don't know in 5-10 minutes how she knew that I might be a good student, but she decided that I was probably going to be a good student. And so then she said, if you want to come to not Rice, Indiana University, I can probably give you not a teaching job, but a graduate assistant position. So you don't have to pay the tuition. So I said, okay. And then she told me that I had to take a GRE test. And I said, what's a GRE? And well, I didn't know what it was at the time, but then she helped me sign up for the exam the next day in Chicago. So I went back to Illinois, and then I took the exam the next day without any prep. And then I submitted the scores, and she said, wow, you're good at math. And I don't like math, but I was pretty good at doing math. And I think there was qualitative studies or something, and I did really well in those two. But verbal section, which language education students always excel in, I received what we call monkey score. So monkeys would be shocked to see my score. It was not bad. So, but that's how I started my master's degree. And then PhD was the same kind of deal. I was trying to see at the end of my master's if I should go into PhD, or if I should go to massage school and aromatherapy school. And I was really leaning towards that. But then I asked the universe to give me a clear sign to choose my path. And I said, please just give me one choice, because otherwise I'm afraid I might choose the wrong one. And so then that evening, I got a phone call from the same professor saying, hey, I saw that you didn't start your PhD application, your PhD material, you should go. And so I took it as a sign, and I finished my PhD. So these are like little things. And obviously, as an academic advisor, she was great, but there were many moments like that were so small and they seem silly, but they ended up playing a very big role. And so that's what I'm kind of aspiring to be when I'm talking to students, because it could be just that one little smile that we have that may brighten someone else's day. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, it's really cool how things fell into place. Like it
Mhm.
even just started with your dog guiding you in the right direction. There's
Right.
so many people who guide us in the right direction in such small ways.
Mhm.
It's cool to hear about your journey. And then I was really interested by your dissertation.
Mhm.
It was like a case study of Arabic-speaking immigrant Muslim parents, right? And their
Yes.
involvement in their children's elementary schooling. So
Mhm.
I was wondering how your research on their involvement in their kids' schoolings might have affected your own teaching styles later on.
Mhm. I think in that dissertation research, what I learned is that sometimes we perceive the um, I don't want to minimize the possibility of discrimination being there, but sometimes discrimination is kind of experienced without necessarily the other party being intentionally discriminating against us. And so with by following this, especially that main family in particular, I heard a lot of stories from them about being discriminated against. Or other times it's like I might be observing them interacting with American people, and I thought that was a little bit disrespectful from the US side. And I just that's kind of odd, the way they worded things to talk to this family. But then the family said, well, aren't they nice? They said these things. So then I thought, well, maybe part of the things about discrimination is that we could be reading more into it than there really is. And the other times, maybe we're not reading enough into the matter. So when I teach, sometimes students, they may bring up some concerns that they may have, or they may feel like they were wronged. And so usually what I try to show them is that it may be true that they've been mistreated, but it may also be true that maybe that mistreatment is not really a mistreatment, and it could be that the other person just not educated enough to use the right words to express themselves. So that's what I try to do. I try to show them that there could potentially be. So then based on the possibilities, then maybe they could give them another chance. And then by then maybe they will figure out, yes, they're just really bad people. Or maybe they are really good people with good intentions, but just they're just not educated in that way, or informed. Yeah, so that's what I try to do.
Yeah. Especially with your expertise in language, I can see how you would be interested in the miscommunication side of
Mm.
things. Do you
Yeah.
think you've ever been on the receiving end of that kind of miscommunication or feelings of discrimination as well?
Yes, quite a few times, but one time that I remember, um, this person was talking about, let's see, she was trying to introduce, it was like a introduction of different multiple cultures, like diversity, but ethnic diversity to her community. And she was from a church, and she was representing the church group. And because I happened to know some members there, she invited me to help out. And then she kept calling me a Korean woman. And so she was saying, like, in Korea, what do you do? And I said, I've never been to Korea, so I don't know. And then a couple of times I would just point out, I'm from Japan, I'm Japanese. So I can't speak on Korean cultures because I just don't know. I don't want to misrepresent the entire nation, And so I was saying that. And then I said, so one last time I said, yes, like I said, I'm Japanese. And then she said, Japan, Korea, what's the difference? And I thought that was just a stupid thing to say. And so I just looked at her and I said, do you really want to talk about diversity, or do you just want to say this, are us versus others? Is that what you're trying to recreate? I don't think she got it. She just got offended that I pointed out that she was wrong again. And so I just left. I talked to people that came to the event, and I talked to them nicely, but that woman, I just didn't have time for her anymore. But I back then I was really young, so maybe now I would have handled it differently, but I'm not quite sure how. And another time I was going through the airport security area in a small Midwestern town. And and this woman she saw me and she decided that I couldn't speak a word of English. So she was just like using her hands to sign, I see your bag I'm going to open. And so she was signing to me and I was really annoyed, but I thought it was really funny before I got annoyed. So I just thought, "Oh, I'm going to be playful." And I said, "Okay, you open my bag to see it's okay." And I started signing back at the same time with my gestures. And then I should have stopped there, but I turned around to my friends and I said, "Hey guys, be nice to this lady. She doesn't speak English." And then my friends were just laughing, like, "Not again. What are you saying?" So that became a teachable moment for her. But at the same time, I used that story repeatedly in my humanities class when I was teaching diversity courses in Tennessee. And what did she mean by it? And oftentimes students' response was, "Well, she thought you were a foreigner." And I said, "Okay, what part of me looks foreign? Is it my black hair, my eyes, my nose, my hands? What is that?" And so then there is the assumed picture of who Americans can be or should be. And but when you ask them explicitly who can be an American, everyone says anyone can be an American. But then there's still the assumption. So yeah, I've experienced that.
Yeah, especially in a country that prides itself so much on diversity, it's always
Mhm.
interesting to hear these anecdotes of how ignorance still persists.
Yes.
Yeah. So then I wanted to transition a little bit into your career now. So early on in your career, you were involved with language translation. And
Mhm.
can you tell us a bit about the work you did and the kind of skills that it takes to excel in this path?
Okay, so one of the first times that I worked as a translator, I think I was 19. I was in college and I went back to Japan for summer. And the government agency was looking for someone to translate. And so I think it was my dad's university that needed that came to my dad, or I can't remember how they found me, but they knew that I was in Japan. So I was translating for I think it was it medical forum or something along that line. And I said, "I know nothing about medicine, and so I should not be translating technical terms." And they said, "Oh no, that we do have someone for those, but it's the like checking them into the hotel and like telling them what time they need to be where, that kind of stuff." And I said, "Yeah, that I can do." So I became a translator. And it and I did that for a large group of visitors from overseas, including the US, but many came from other Asian countries. And I did that for a while, but sometimes um, there were times that they needed some like specific terminology that I didn't have, but the translators that they had hired for that kind of translation really could not communicate well. They knew the terms and they could translate, but there was some kind of gap in the communication skills. And but the communication skill was what I had, and I didn't have the terminology. So I ended up just telling the visitors that I didn't know these big words in English or Japanese, but I will be willing to translate it for you. And so I did that for a few days. It was like maybe a 1 week forum. So I became a translator. When you're translating simultaneously, you have to you're hearing sounds in English and you're spitting out Japanese words or vice versa. And so you really have to keep going, like boom, boom, boom. The only thing that was a struggle for me was that in Japanese, we have the verbs at the end. In English, you have that right after the subject usually. So like I eat sushi would be I sushi eat in Japanese. Except that we also omit a lot of the personal pronouns. So eat sushi eat would be I eat sushi. But because the verbs are at the end and also negative forms that comes with the verbs in Japanese. So when a person was repeating in Japanese, I and then sushi, sake, tempura, ramen, and all the rest. And I'm still waiting for the verbs. By the time the person got to the verbs, I may have forgotten some of the words that they were listing. So I learned very quickly at that time that I needed to just say those words regardless of what the verbs may have been. And I would say, he's saying ramen, sushi, da 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 da. And then, oh, and he says he didn't like them. So stuff like that. I couldn't predict if he was gonna say I ate them or I would love to try them or I hated them. I loved them. So that was the struggle for me at that time.
Yeah, you really have to think on your feet for that.
Hmm.
And then you also taught math for some time. And do you think there are similarities between teaching math and language? Do you find math to be a kind of language too in your approach?
Yes, I do think math and language are math is one type of language, is what I think. Um, I don't really see much similarity between the two in my teaching method, but there was one time, so I taught different levels of math. So one time I taught calculus, but it was in Japanese, and that turned out to be a disaster since I only studied calculus in English and not in Japanese. So I didn't know how to say sine, cosine, tangent. And so I had to ask the students to go home, and these were Japanese kids studying in America. And so I had to teach the subjects in Japanese. But these kids, I said, just go home and ask your parents how to say sine, cosine, tangent. That's your first homework. If you do well, you get a sticker or something. And then they came back and said sine, cosine, tangento. I said, oh yes, good job. And so that was kind of hard. But when I was teaching very basic math at a community college, um, I had to teach addition, like 1 + 2 is the same as 2 + 1, or started with that. And we went into fractions. And fractions, this threw off a lot of the students at the community college, and they just couldn't seem to understand it. And I try to explain with the pie and or pizza and say you divide it into 8 pieces. So I thought of those things and I tried that too, but it was not really making sense to everybody. Many students got it, but some still didn't get it. And then when we got to improper fractions where you have a bigger numerator than the denominator, that threw them off completely. So I decided to think of the Japanese fractions. And in Japanese, we say the numerator is the um, division child or fraction child, and then the denominator is the fraction mother. So I decided to use that concept, and I drew a house with a 2-story house. And I said, downstairs are the parents, upstairs are the kids. Upstairs kids, they grow up. And if the kids grow up so much that they're bigger than the parents, you need to kick out the independent kids. So when you have 8/5, then at least one child is completely grown. Let's kick them out. So then they said, oh, 1 3/5. And so that's kind of how I taught math. So I saw that kind of connection, and I do use a lot of cultural things when I'm teaching math, and I do use math in my teaching in Japanese as well. But but in the Japanese class, I think I tend to teach how to say certain things about math using Japanese rather than bringing the math concept into the Japanese language.
I see. Either way, I see how storytelling frames a lot of how you teach, and I think that makes you really effective. So
Mhm.
then, going back to teaching now, so you became adjunct faculty at Belmont University. What made you move to Nashville, and then what was this move like in terms of career and also location?
At that time I was working at a medical school, or not medical, so medical device company in Indiana. I was also, I was just done with the PhD at that point, and I was also creating teaching materials in Arabic for the university, but I also had a full-time job at a medical device company. And then I realized that my visa was running out. And so I had to apply for a new visa. But the medical company was just not working out. And so I looked for another teaching job somewhere. And so At that point, my parents were in China. My father was teaching Sumerian, German, and French in China using English. My dad gave up on Chinese language studies after Ni Hao, and so he he just stopped there. But my mom was speaking Chinese, and anyway, so they were there in China, and they met a lot of Chinese faculty and students, as well as some foreign faculty that were there, like my dad was. And one of them is a professor at Sam Houston State University, and they were next door neighbors to each other. And so at that time, I was looking for a teaching job, and I asked my father to get me connected to some of his professor friends. And so, and one of them was the Sam Houston State University professor who had already come back to the US from China. And so I emailed him, and my dad also did. And I said, hi, this is so and so. I would like to, I'm looking for a teaching job. If you happen to know of any university that are looking for a Japanese teacher, please let me know. And so I emailed him that. And then he said, oh, I happen to have just heard from Belmont University that was looking for a Japanese teacher. And so here I am. And so that's how I got the job. And I was teaching there, but I was teaching humanities on diversity and awareness, and also Japanese and language education courses, and first year writing type of course. And there was something else that I taught, but I can't remember. So, oh
Were,
yeah.
were you still connected with Arabic at this time?
I was a little bit, but by the time I moved to Tennessee, my focus had completely shifted to Japanese. So I started forgetting Arabic very quickly.
Mhm. And at the same time, you were a Japan Exchange and Teaching Program interviewer at the Consulate General of Japan in Nashville. How
Mhm.
did you find this position, and what do you think the role of teaching exchange programs in general is?
I think it's a really good program. In fact, I think when what I'm hoping for is that yes, they can teach English, but more than that, if they can make Japanese kids dream bigger than the oceans and the sea around the country, because it's an island country, and it's kind of harder for Japanese to imagine leaving the country than someone who lives on the border of like Mexico or Canada and say, oh, I'm just going to go there just for a few hours and have lunch and come back, you know. So I always just hope that these JET, the Japan Exchange Teaching, we call it JET people, to invite these kids that they meet in Japan to imagine that it's possible to go outside the country. And Americans are fun people and not scary people, because you know, if you the unknown is always scary. So if they can be the friendly face that they meet when they're 10 years old, like I did with the French pianist, I think that would be a really great thing. And I do trust that that's how it's working. So I've been a JET interviewer for quite a few years at this point, and I think that that is exciting.
Do you get a chance to hear from students afterwards about what they thought about the program?
Yes, so the applicants, I don't necessarily know a lot of the applicants except for the ones that I interview, but even then I forget, and they forget who I am. For them, I'm just one interviewer. But some of the Rice students would go on that program, and they come back and they tell me what they have experienced. And sometimes they send me pictures or send me stories, and I think that's really good. And my nephews and nieces are all in Japan, and so they tell me about their jets that they have at their schools. And so I do think I really hope that it's working in a positive way for everybody.
Mhm. And I think your own efforts towards kind of that kind of transnational experience is also really effective for students, and you continue to lead Rice in Japan. So, can you tell us what it's like to facilitate and coordinate these trips?
Yeah, so I had done something like this before at the previous university as well, but each time I do think that students are going to learn the language structures and so forth, whether they're here or not. But I think when they're in Japan, I'm hoping that they gain something out of the trip that is so unique that they couldn't have gotten otherwise. And but also I want them to bring a great impact on the local people there. And that's why I try to make sure that my students have some ways of interacting with this with the host families. And this past summer, so last year, 2023, I remember I taught my students some of the oldest ways of saying, like giving a gift. And you would say, I'm sorry for this really boring gift, but if you don't mind, please accept it. Now, no one says that like that today. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say no one, because people still, I'm sure some people still use it. But to say, oh, it's a boring gift, but please accept it, it sounds very traditional. And so Japanese people are just definitely not expecting that from American students, especially young people. And but that's what I teach them. And so they the first night they went to the host family's home, and then the next day they came back and they said, Sensei, why did you teach us to say this? And I said, okay, well, tell me what the problem was, right? And then they said, well, the host family kind of laughed and said, that's so old, why are you saying this? And so then they said, Sensei, why did you make us say these things? And I said, after that, what happened? And they said, oh, they laughed, and then they taught us the newer way of saying it. And then we moved on to the next topic. And I said, that's the reason. It's an icebreaker. So I want them to experience the authentic learning opportunity, not just what's in the classroom. And that can only be done when they're with the local people there. So that's something that I try to do. And also I'm I'm pretty close to this. So Fujieda, my third hometown that I'm calling my second, because I don't remember the first or the second very well. But anyway, so this second hometown, Fujieda, the the mayor, his staff and everybody, they know me fairly well, and even if they don't recognize my face, well, many of them do, but not the mayor, I don't think. But they know my name, they know who I am, and so I try to make sure that my students meet local people, and not just the people that volunteer to be host families in Tokyo, but they can meet local people in the countryside, and that has a different flavor. And so I try to incorporate that. So even during COVID time, students could not necessarily travel there. So what I ended up doing was I talked to the mayor's staff, and we got connected with the local people and the citizens of that city, and they would sign up, and then they would meet my students on Zoom. And so my students would be giving presentations in Japanese. I just, it was only open to the students that volunteered to do it. I didn't make it into a curriculum in the class, because I don't know if everybody wanted to be seen by people that are not in the class. So I made it a choice, but a lot of them volunteered to give a presentation in Japanese, even with the first semester level of Japanese. And then I was there to help. And then there was Q&A session from Japan side. And so one student in particular, he wanted to talk about LGBTQ topic. And so he gave a great presentation. And then Q&A, it was, they were asking a lot of good questions to him, and he was able to broaden their mind a little bit better. And especially because it's not, I don't think it's seen as a negative thing necessarily in Japan for the most part, but it is a topic that's considered sensitive enough that no one really asks questions. And I think it's very healthy for this young student to be able to educate them by sharing his stories. And so that was really great. And now the mayor is asking him and a few other students to come back to Japan so that they can give a workshop to the citizens.
Wow, it's so valuable that there's that kind of two-way learning. Like you're both
Yeah,
learning from the local community and then providing your own identity and perspectives. That's
yeah,
really,
yeah, it's exciting.
and I think there's only so much that you can learn in the classroom. And so I think these immersive experiences are probably invaluable to your students.
Yeah.
So, but then within the classroom, you still have so many unique ways to help students retain and learn language. So, one example, could you tell us what Ozaki theater is?
Yes, so Ozaki Theater is where I just teach well, I just tell a story in Japanese. And I do that even in the first semester Japanese class. Um it's typically really silly, but and really funny, silly, and all of that. So I'm trying to think of an example, but something that happened to me. Uh I'm thinking of this one where there was an Indian chef at an Indian restaurant in Japan, and he was fluent in Japanese, but the word naan, like the Indian bread, that naan in Japanese means what? So this grandma, a Japanese grandma, came to the restaurant and looked at the bread, and then she said, "What is this?" And the man said, "Yes, it is naan, but like what is this? Is none, right? So naan, is it none?" And he said, "Yes, it is none." But she was actually asking like, what is it? But there was miscommunication all over the place, and it was really cute. So anyway, so something like that, or things about me almost being robbed in on the train in Greece, and so that kind of story. Some things are usually it's very comical. I don't really focus on anything too sad in the class, but yeah, I tell these short stories in Japanese, and then I invite students to retell the story. It could be on the same day, it could be the next class, but the stories are so far out there that they end up just remembering the story, and then I just kind of give them some grammar patterns that I want them to use in that instance. So I might say, okay, now passive voice. Let's add this, let's add that, and then they all play along. So that's Ozaki theater.
Wow. I think your storytelling is unmatched, Sensei. So
Oh, thank you.
I wonder though, how did COVID impact your teaching? Did you still carry on with Ozaki Theater even through the screens?
Yes, I still did Ozaki theater on the screen, but when I was doing it in class, I'm always moving my hands, and then I draw pictures on the board, which I can't do when I'm doing Ozaki theater on Zoom. So for those days, unless it was a spontaneous storytelling, I prepared some of the visual art on on PowerPoint, and so I'll be telling the story as shown as I showed the pictures on the screen. So that changed a little bit in that sense, but still for the most part I would just do whatever I want to tell them, and the students would just react, and it's always great to see students reacting, and some of the students are I don't know if they're learning that much more Japanese by being in my class when it comes to contents, but they're definitely learning things through Ozaki theater, and that seems to be what the students remember, even if they forget the verb conjugation here and there, they remember the story. So I try to put that on the test too sometimes, and then so when my students are taking the test, sometimes I see them laughing. I just tell them focus, focus, and they're like, "Sensei, you put this story in the on the test." But yeah.
I think that's a dream to laugh during a test. Crying is more common. So also during COVID, I read a little bit about your Amazing Race project.
Ah,
Could you tell us about how you incorporated that into your learning?
yes, Rita, you're so amazing. You found even that. I forgot about it. Okay,
I was going to know more.
so Amazing Race. I love the TV show. You get to travel everywhere, but you have to solve some kind of riddle or some task that you have to complete to get to the next level. So on Canvas, there's a uh, it's called I think it's called passcode, so that you can open the next quiz with the passcode. So I decided to make the passcode the answer to the riddle for the previous page. So the riddle only shows up when students answer the questions correctly. And so that implies that students had to do all of the questions correctly before they could get the riddle, which implicitly says that you're going to get 100% on the whole sequence, because otherwise you can't move to the next one. So grading wise, I'm not sure if that's the most ideal, but at the very least, I can say that all of my students have attempted, and I gave them multiple attempts so they could get somehow get to the end. So they all got 100% on that task, but there were like 10 or 12 steps I think they had to do, and that was a part of the final project. So they had to create, they had to answer these things, and so some of the questions were about like grammar, and so they had to conjugate the verbs correctly. And then once they get the correct answer, then the next hint pops up. Until they get to that, they can't open it. And so then they may get something like, what city is surrounded by this and this and this city, and then that word plus the noodles or oh, and how do you say this word in English? And it was min. And so I said, now you shuffle them around. What word, what kind of food do you get? And the answer was ramen, but they had to correctly spell ramen so that they could get to the next page. And so that became the secret code to crack the next page open.
Wow, I think framing things as games is such a good idea, and it's cool how you were able to do that with technology.
Yeah, well, this past semester, I had a really bad case of cold twice in a semester. So I didn't skip a class. I had to move the class to Zoom for a week or so, but outside of that, I taught just fine. But I felt like I was not ready to give the final project in the way that I had originally planned. So I told the students that that they could choose to do this or that for final project, and you can really do the final project in a shorter amount of time, or we can play games in the class, but I will be grading how you're using the Japanese language, and no English allowed during the game. And they all opted for that. And so I said, okay, fine. So I had to create games, and so I decided to kind of surprise them, and so I had a murder mystery in the class. And then so we played it, and the students really liked it. So my goal was to give them a task where they could really use the language as a tool, because that's the ultimate goal. When you're seeing Japanese as a subject to master, then the focus is just on the mastery. But if you can focus on the task at hand and then use the language that they learned as a tool, then it's a usable skill. And that's what I'm going for. So by playing that murder mystery, I think it worked out really well. My only problem with it is that students liked it so much that they're asking me to do it again this year. And so that means that I have to prepare another murder mystery. And so that I'm not so sure about, but
I think it's a good problem to have.
yeah.
So, a little more along the lines of technology. So, you've given presentations at national conferences about incorporating virtual reality data in teaching. What do you think the role of technology is broadly in translation and language acquisition?
Okay, so technology, I think it gives us a chance to see the language without having to meet people. Where in the past it was just from the textbooks or from meeting people in person, usually in person. So, and that was fine. But now students watch YouTube all the time, or they see different kinds of recordings that I have, and I can show it to them in class, or maybe I can even post it on Canvas and they can watch it at their own time. So the world has changed so much that they have the access to the Japanese culture or language without me being there or without the books being there. So they have more of a real-time interactions if they want to. So that I think that is one of the biggest differences. And even though I claim to be 21 with many years of experience, I'm not from this era. I shouldn't say I'm not from this era, but I'm not, from this generation. And so I didn't grow up with technology in that same way. And so I have to constantly be asking IT people at Rice. I think they know my login name and my name because I call them all the time asking for their advice, and they're really great about it. Or I would ask my students in the class, and they usually have some really great ideas. And one of the first things that I do at the beginning of the semester is to ask how many of them were computer science majors, and there were usually quite a few. So I just tell them, okay, if I need technology help, I'm gonna ask for you. And so they always step up and help me, because at one point I called the IT for help in the classroom because the computer was not responding. Even though I used the mouse, I tapped on the keyboard, nothing was happening. So I called them. They came rushing and they said, "Ma'am, did you turn on the computer?" And I said, "What do you mean I have to turn on the computer? It's always on." And they said, "No, someone turn it off." And I said, "Oh." So I'm at that level. So my friends, my Arab friends, that I was interviewing for dissertation, they used to make fun of me because they were like, "You're a low-tech Japanese." And then one day they said, "Maybe you're a no-tech Japanese." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine." I really don't know. All right. So I try to ask the young people for their advice.
And do you ever think that technology will kind of be able to act as that in between and ever be able to perfectly translate language, or is there necessarily going to always be a human component?
Yeah, I do think that technology has its own place in like translation and so forth. For example, the one of the most recent newspaper article, an online paper article that came out, I shared it with my parents, especially my dad. I thought he would find it fun to read about what I'm doing here. And so my dad read the whole thing in English and he was fine. And then for my mom, he was reading it to my mom, and she knows some English but not very well. And then my brother was just visiting my parents at the time. So my brother said, "Oh, why don't you just use Google Translate?" So they used that. They didn't understand all of the details, but they understood most of it. And Google Translate is still working hard to make it better for Japanese, but it was good enough that my mom was able to read it and appreciate what was said about me. So I think there is that. But um things like what we call pragmatics. So what you say explicitly may not convey what you really want to say in the heart. So for example, if someone comes over to your house and then they see a little child and they might say, "Hi, is your mom there?" And then the child says yes, but just keep standing there, right? Or on the phone. Um, so so when they're what that really means is the person's asking, "Is your mom there?" Meaning, can I talk to your mom? Can your mom come to the door? But the child is just taking it literally. Yes, my mom is home. So it's that kind of stuff that I don't know if the technology can take care of that kind of uh, implicit meanings. Because explicit things, I think you can translate it and you can rely on technologies to take care of that, at least for the most part. But when it comes to implicit meanings, I'm not sure to what extent you can translate and still really be understood for in the way that you want them to.
Right. There's so much beyond the text. And then
Yeah,
beyond the text, there's still so much that lies in the culture that you kind of really have to go back to that immersion that you were talking about.
right. And so I feel like a lot of language teachers are worried about losing their jobs because of the technology. But I think I'm still okay for for the rest of my life. But beyond that, I'm not sure how that goes.
Yeah, I think you're safe. I don't think any computer could ever replicate Ozaki Theater also.
Thank you.
And then lastly, to conclude this kind of career section, what is the most rewarding aspect of your job?
So I love meeting young people. I love talking to them. I love sharing what I know, but I also learn a lot from the students. And what I love about learning from students is not just the content that they're teaching me, because they could be teaching me sometimes at Lovett, for example, there are some students that want to teach me about the math that they're studying. It's not for me to really understand the math, even though that is the surface level meaning behind our conversation. But what I'm seeing is the the excitement and satisfaction and sense of accomplishment that the student is feeling by being able to explain something to me. And I think that is a really great thing, that they can move forward with knowing that they were able to do something for another person. So that's what I really enjoy seeing. In the Japanese class, obviously, I want them to learn Japanese and so forth. But I'm hoping that in my class they learn that they can be who they are, and I would just love and adore them regardless. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm okay with like someone being rude, for example. But I try to contextualize a lot of things. And so when someone's being rude, I just think, okay, maybe there is something is maybe this person's not realizing that they're being rude, or it may be that they're angry, they're hurt inside for some reason. Then I can reach out and talk to them. And so that makes me feel like my existence has some meaning somewhere.
I think the relationships that you build are so valuable, and especially as a Lovett RA, I get to see some of that happening. And I'd like to ask what made you interested in the position of being a residential associate at Lovett College?
Okay, so initially, I thought that I was so busy, and I am always busy, and I have always been busy. So I thought maybe I'm not the best RA, or I'm not the best person for that. But students started inviting me to apply for an RA position the year before. So I applied, and I was one of the finalists at another college, but I was not the last one chosen. So then I thought, okay, well, if if students ask me to apply again, I will. So I had been a Lovett associate for ever since I came to Rice. So I knew Lovett best. And I like the hippie vibe that we have. But I didn't really I just decided if any of the students asked me to apply, then I will. So at that time there were, I can't remember how many colleges were looking for an RA, but I applied to basically all of them because somebody from each college was in my class and asked me to apply. Love it. I think first I heard it from Sharon, the college coordinator, that there was an opening. And then I thought, oh, that's really nice. And then a student came and asked me, and I applied. And then and when I was selected, I was really surprised, especially given that I was born with a disability, and so I have a hard time climbing up and down the steps. And so the RA suite that they had in mind initially was in a building that didn't have an elevator, and there was no real first floor. So I thought, oh, it's not really for me. And so I said that much, and I said, I'm totally fine if you choose another person, because there's going to be some place where I can live with my disability but still be okay. And but then they said, oh, no, that's not going to be the reason that you don't, um you I mean, that's not going to keep you from living here. So I said, okay, well, that's great. Then give me zip lining and I'll just go up and down. And then said, oh, that would be great. But obviously adult members were like, oh, no, let's be more realistic. And then now they renovated a first floor apartment for me to move into. So I've been very happy ever since.
Oh, I'm so glad you're at Lovett.
Me
Um,
too.
how has your relationship to students and teaching changed as you became more integrated with the residential life?
Yeah, so I didn't know how little students slept at night until I moved in, and I'm a morning person, so around 8:30 or so I get sleepy. It's like passing my bedtime, but students are still wide awake, and that's when they start getting into the studies again. And so I didn't know the rhythm of the student life until then. So I think I've always given a lot of small assignments to my students, but I started, and also with the help of Canvas, I decided to create homework assignments, even in a smaller segment at a time, and many more days of assignments. I know that it's not the best solution for all of the students, but at least they have enough days ahead of before the deadline so that they can adjust how much assignment they want to do in one sitting and so forth. So knowing that, I think that has changed a little bit in that sense. And I try to tell my students, make sure you rest, And so that's one of the things that I always say, don't forget to take a break. Because Rice students tend to just push, push, push. And I just think that they have to also rest, and that needs to be calculated into their lives. And I'm trying to follow my own advice by doing that too.
Yeah, that goes right into my next question about how from like tea time and nail painting and sharing curry, watching movies, I feel like you're always trying to help students de-stress and maintain that healthy work-life balance.
Mhm.
So, what advice do you have to students to find that balance, and what are your own activities that you like to do to find
Yeah.
your
Okay, so I love incense sticks, and so I buy some incense sticks from place in Rice Village. I go there all the time, and I buy incense, and I burn them outside in the quad. And sometimes students come by, and some students say that it reminds them of home because they grew up with that kind of incense smell, and I love that. But I also try to do what I call sayonara letter. And so I love it. We sometimes have done it, and I'm hoping to do it again this semester too, where students come and then they write what they don't want to see in their lives or what's bothering them on a piece of paper, or the dreams that they're hoping to realize. And then we burn it together in like little campfire thing, and then let the smoke take the messages to the heaven so that it's no longer their worries or their concern. So that's I try to release things that way as well. And I do so sometimes students come because they're stressed out, and I just tell them that we can do sea salt with some essential oils like aromatherapy. And then they sprinkle that onto the salt. They put it in a small bag, like sandwich bag. And then I just tell them you can carry it around in your bag, or you can put it under the pillow and you can sleep better. And at the very least, you know that I will be thinking about you for your good sleep. And so a lot of Lovett students have come and taken that, and they say that that's usually helpful. And yeah, I think knowing that someone else cares, I think that means a lot. So that's what I'm hoping for. And so that would be one thing. And I do that myself, but because I have cats, Bruce and Lee, they don't seem to really care for essential oil so much. And so I try not to bring that into the bedroom so much, but every once in a while I need some sleep, and then my cats are just staying away from the essential oil.
Yeah, I really do value the incense that you burn in quad sometimes because it does remind me of home sometimes. We used
Oh,
to do that in India when we lived there.
yeah.
But I think there are so many ways that you make students feel seen and know that someone's looking out for them. So we really do appreciate that.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for saying that. And the other thing I do is to try to encourage them to go get help at the well-being office, because um, as long as we're living, we have things that we want to get off of our chest, and but we don't always have the right person or situation to share everything with another person. And I do believe that counselors and staff at well-being center, they are trained to professionally trained to listen to students worries, concerns, or even happy things. They're not just there to hear your problems, but it's you can the way I see it is that you can say what you need to say and to be heard with respect. With friends, it is possible, and I hope we all have good friends that we can talk to about anything. But sometimes we just need a new perspective. And so sometimes I walk with the students to get to the well-being office, and I just say, okay, now you're going to be okay. Come back and tell me if you want to talk to me again. But otherwise, you're in good hands. And then I will still check on my students, but I'm not going to go into details, like unless the students want to tell me what happened or what they talked about. So I think because Rice does have great resources like that, I'm grateful that the students have us, but also they can go to a professional in that field.
Yeah, it's good to have that link to professional help, but also have someone to help you take that first step, I think is really hard.
Yeah.
And then lastly, you are on no small quest to be in the Guinness Book of World Records and break the record for the longest sushi roll with the sushi committee that you formed over your time here at Lovett. So I'd love to hear about your hopes for this project, especially that community outreach component that you've also incorporated.
Yes, so right now it's kind of put on hold because of some technical issues, but we're definitely getting it done. And the Guinness Book, this thought came up when I was being interviewed for an RA position. And so they said, what can you do that makes separates you from the rest of the RA candidates? And I said, well, I'll do, like study breaks like curry and so forth, but I would love to do something fun, like making sushi with everybody. And while we're making sushi, why not make the longest sushi ever created? And I was thinking it was going to be like 100 meters of sushi, but no, the current record is 1.6 miles. So then I said, did you say 1.6? Because someone was interviewing me and checking it as we were talking. And so she said, it's 1.6 miles. And I said, 1.6. Okay, then we should go for 3. And so that's how it started. And so, yeah, but with this, I don't believe in us just doing things just for ourselves. It's so much easier for us to say, what's in it for me? But I'm trying to get the Rice students' mind away from that a little bit. And not that Rice students have been selfish, but I think it's just a natural thing to think about what's in it for me. But especially graduating from Rice University, that diploma is going to say something in the future. So you're going to be a graduate of Rice, and then they will see you as that person that has accomplished so much already. And so then that voice may be heard a little more loudly than say someone who doesn't have a Rice degree. And so I don't want the students to be in a position of power in the future, forgetting peasants like me, and then just go, well, I have this so much power over these other people. And then if you forget little people, then they're not any better than somebody else that could have had that job. And I want the Rice graduates to be able to say, I have this position, how can I use it to benefit other people as well as for me? It should still benefit them too, but I wanted to realize that there are other people around them as well. So that's what I was hoping to do. So with this project, I have been working with Lovett students, sushi committee members. I think now we're calling ourselves some Rice committee. And so some Rice sushi committee students, and I have chosen a few different organizations that we can donate to. So there are quite a few donations given to us that we're almost ready to start accepting the donations, but we're just waiting on just a few technical stuff to line up. But once that's done, we'll start accepting donations. We'll go with Guinness, and then we will then be able to start the project, the real project, and we'll roll. And once we raise enough money, and we're hoping to raise a lot of money, then we'll be donating back to like kidney foundation for transplants, because there are people that are waiting, and then there has to be more awareness raised there, and also cancer research and educational supplies for low-income family kids. And also there was, oh, of course, mental health. That's so important. So we're looking at mental health of America, and then there are a few other ones that other committee members have been suggesting. So we're looking into those as well. And so we're hoping to raise enough awareness among the Rice students that come and participate in it, or just come and cheer for us to do it. And then that can be a raise consciousness awareness raising activity, so that they can give back. And I hope they get some sort of sense of accomplishment and satisfaction in being able to give back to the community, because it's not just us and our hard work alone that got us where we are. We have been helped by a lot of people, and so we cannot forget those people. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think when you're making a 3 mile long sushi roll, you realize that you're literally part of something bigger than yourself. But
Yes.
it's really cool to be able to see how it's actually more than just this world record. It's about bringing the community together and highlighting
Yes.
important issues.
Yes, so I think it's really exciting, and there have been a lot of great people in the community, and I'm keeping their names out right now just because I haven't had their permission to say them. But there are some really amazing people at Rice Village, and other people, other partners that we have. And so one organization, this one I think I'm allowed to say, it's Japanese American Citizens League, JACL, Houston chapter. They have been great in assisting us with this. And so we're just really hoping that this is done properly and well thought out. And the other group that I would like to mention is there's Serenity Studio in Rice Village, and they have been just they're the number one fans and supporters and organizers and fundraisers for us. And they have been meeting with the students and with me all the time, and they're trying to work everything out. And thanks to them, we're on a right track.
I'm
So,
really excited to see where this project goes, and you have the support of so many people behind you. So,
yeah, so it's great. Yeah.
mm,
Even Bruce and Lee's vet is supporting us.
really, maybe
Yes.
Bruce and Lee can help too.
Yeah, maybe they can be the little
Us.
mascots.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I can wrap them in some seaweed looking blanket and I'll call them.
Maybe from the sushi, yeah.
Yeah.
Sushi cats, yeah. So for the last section of this interview, it's just to tell us a little bit about your identity and perspectives. So how would you identify yourself ethnically?
So I'm Japanese, I'm Asian, I'm Japanese. And I do think that when people ask me what I am, I just say I'm Japanese, and it's fun to be able to say that, but at the same time, I don't think that alone defines who I am. I think I'm a lot more global than just what one word can describe. And so I hope, even though I do say I'm from Japan, I hope people give me a chance to 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 be who I am, and they get to see me as I am. But I think identity is oftentimes it can shift depending on who you're talking to and in what context you're having a conversation in. And so usually I just say I'm from Japan, but then that doesn't always describe my past or who I am today. And so, for example, when I was robbed or almost robbed in Greece, and the police officer was taking my statement after I got rid of the robbers and so at that point the officer was not writing anything down, and even though he was supposed to be taking my statement, and he ended up saying, so I have one question. And I said, what is it? And he said, you said you're from Japan, how come you speak English? And it's that kind of stuff that that comes my way all the time. And now in America you can say, well, anyone can be an American. It doesn't matter what you look like, you can be an American. But that kind of judgment still exists in the world. So this was in Greece, but it also happens in Japan too. So I could be speaking in Japanese, and suddenly I turn around and start speaking in English, and that surprises a lot of Japanese people and go like, you speak Japanese? Or I could be speaking in Arabic in Egypt, and then that throws people off, usually in a good way. And I get a lot of free things there in Egypt because of that.
Right. How do you think we can develop more of that cultural understanding, or does it just come with more exposure?
I think it's exposure and probably education as well, because I think when you ask, most Americans would say anyone can be an American, regardless of your uh, racial background or ethnicity, identity, and anything else. But um, but then so that comes from explicit education, but the implicit experiences or experienced education, I think that can really solidify what you learn in school. So, and I think it can go in both directions too. But I do think that when someone says, oh, no, I know anyone can be an American, but still, these are professor friends, okay, from different states, but they would just just go like, if I don't see your face, I would have thought that you were an American. And what they were really trying to say is that they were trying to give me a compliment on my English, but it was also at the same time make disrespectful in a way that they just showed me that they were assuming that to be an American, you have to look a certain way. So my face being this way was just not good enough to be an American.
Right.
Not good enough as in like value of it, but like it did not fit the criteria.
Yeah,
And
it's still fighting the idea of a foreigner, right?
right, right.
And out of
Yeah.
all the places you've lived, is there one place that you would call home, or is that fluid as well?
It used to be fluid, but now I would say Houston and
Mhm.
Rice University specifically. I'm very, very happy here at Rice. I love teaching and meeting with Rice students. And I'm known to talk to total strangers often. And that seems to surprise students, but that's also probably a good thing for them to also witness that it's okay to talk to people. And here I do feel supported and safe and appreciated. And and if you can find a place where you know you're appreciated, I think that's the best place to be. And this is it for me.
That's really nice. And then for your current household, can you tell us about your cats, Bruce and Lee, who you'd mentioned, and how you got them?
Okay, so Bruce and Lee, so I've always liked dogs a lot, and I love cats too, but I'm more of a dog person, which I will never admit to saying in front of my cats. But when I was being interviewed for the RA position, the interviewers were asking me if I would have any pets, and I said, well, if I'm going to have a pet in the future, especially as an RA, I would have two cats. It's because I want to make sure that I can take care of them. And having a dog would be a little difficult with my disability. Sometimes I have bad days when I can't really walk. And so I said I would love to have cats. And I want to have two cats that are siblings from the same litter so that litter mates can tolerate each other better than territorial cats that are two independent cats. So that was my goal. And so I decided when I was chosen to be an RA, I started contacting the shelters and I was interviewed to be if I were a fit parent to the cats. And then initially they said that they were giving me another set of cats, kittens, but they didn't want to come. They refused to get into the carrier at the foster parents' house. And they had never refused that to that extent. So I went to pick them up and I came back empty-handed. I was so heartbroken, but I figured I trust that cats know where they want to be. And so maybe that was just not the best fit for a college life with a lot of students around. Students come and go, they come and visit and stuff like that. So I trusted the universe enough to say, okay, give me the best pair. And then the shelters, they were saying, well, you don't have to get litter mates. You can have two cats from different parents and it'll be okay. And I said, it may be okay, but I would really love to have litter mates. And so I waited. And within a day, they found another pair. And it was Bruce and Lee. And I wanted the names Bruce and Lee because first I wanted to call them by my favorite actor from Japan called Ken Watanabe. But my brother is Ken, my brother-in-law is Ken. I didn't want another Ken. And also Watanabe is too long of a name for non-Japanese speaking students to remember. So I thought, oh, Bruce Lee would do. So that's why I got Bruce and Lee. And when I went to pick them up, and at the beginning they were not too thrilled to be in a new place. But within a few hours, they came out and they were totally happy, I think. And now they're kind of like they own that space, and I'm doing the homestay with their house at their house.
That's cute. I remember when I first met them, calling my parents, telling them I met Bruce Lee. He's at Lovett. I met Bruce and Lee.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah, I
the
usually just call them Bruce Lee, just as a pair. They're always together. They play with each other. They run around together. They eat together. They sleep together. They were just really they're good siblings.
Mhm.
So yeah, I just put them together, Bruce Lee.
They're also RAs of Lovett at this point. So the last thing is if you could go back in time to tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Hmm, I think so. Even though I tend to be pretty positive and upbeat most of the time, I did go through my share of hardships. And so I would like to go back and just tell them everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to work out somehow. And we don't always know how or when, but we just have to trust that everything will work out. And so that's what I would like to tell them. And I think that's what I'm telling the young people today. Because some bad things have happened because of some people's bad intentions. And but then that's the reason that I got to come to Rice, for example. I lost my job my at the last place in a really, really bad way, and it was done by people intentionally. And but without going into details, and if you want to hear the details, I will tell you, but maybe not on the air. But I do think that that things have happened, and I try to make sure that I was telling myself at the time, I'm going to look back someday and I'm going to say thank you for being such bad people with bad intentions, because I'm going to find myself at a much bigger, better, wonderful place. And here I am today. So that's what I try to remind students when they're going through things. Yeah, obviously some things are much more difficult to deal with, but I just don't want them to lose hope. So,
I'm so glad you ended up where you did and you're able to help so many students now get through their own adversities.
oh,
So,
thank you for doing that. Yeah, I love being here.
yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
Mm, no, I just I hope people can travel um physically, or at least by talking to people. Like there are a lot of H&D people, for example, that come from different countries, different cultural backgrounds. Even if they're from here, they have stories to tell. You get to meet professors, you get to meet classmates and hear their stories maybe, but H&D people are oftentimes in our area. They may be cleaning for us, they may be doing other things for us, but we don't always give them a chance to tell us their stories. So if you have a chance to talk to them, they have their own stories, they have their own wisdom to share, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And so that's the kind of program that I started at the previous university, and that was a big hit. And I haven't really done that here, but I think because I was teaching humanities, and so that was pretty it was a good fit. And I someday maybe we can start something like that. Maybe
Mhm.
starting at Lovett, but that can be a very unique opportunity for both parties, for the students as well as the H&D staff members.
Yeah, if I got to sit down with them like this and ask them questions about their lives, I think that would be the dream.
Yes, yes. And it can be just, like once, twice a semester, but we can start small and then just ask them, can we have lunch together? And then ask them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end of the interview. Thank you so much, Sensei, for doing this. I'm gonna stop the recording here.
Thank you.